Can you turn that music down? I can barely hear myself talk. You had it way too loud last episode.
We need to get out of here, Lore Master!
What? No! We need to fix Amazon's Rings of Power into a cohesive storyline.
One does not simply fix Amazon?
Then we'll use still images and sprinkle in the better movies as we go on.
I suppose. Aren't they going to send their lawyers? I hear they call them judges. Amazon, legal team.
It's fine. Oh, I didn't see that you stuffed the initiative into a suitcase. Perfect, we can go and get started. Can you get them out of the suitcase?
Alright, I probably couldn't afford the airplane check bag prices anyway.
Sorry about that, Initiate. Welcome to another episode of the Lorebound series. I am the Lore Master.
Still in training.
We are in the Lorebound Library, where millions of multiverses merge to discuss the lore of various stories. Today we discuss how to fix Amazon's Rings of Power.
I have a few ideas involving a trash can, some gasoline, a blowtorch, a cement truck, a shark, and a nuclear bomb!
Chatterwicks, it's possible Initiative enjoys Rings of Power. There's bound to be someone who enjoys it.
Yeah, one.
The art direction and music and graphics are all really nice. Okay, so let's get started. What if I told you that Rings of Power could have been a masterpiece? That the second age of Middle-earth, filled with betrayal, ambition, and divine wrath, was reduced to a jumbled mess. But what if we could fix it without cramming thousands of years of history into just a little 7-year plot? No ships that are clown cars for horses, no teleporting armies around the world, none of that. Tolkien was a master class of world design, and even though the Silmarillion covers many years, it has an easy solution. But first, a lot of channels out there are what are called the fandom menace. And while I enjoy watching a couple on occasion,
I think I'd get along with Doomcock. He's the future ruler!
yeah, you probably would. He actually does seem nice. But I am not part of the fandom menace. At least I don't consider myself that. Bad writing doesn't necessarily mean anything besides bad writers. And if we look at it constructively, we may be able to solve some issues. There's absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying a franchise that the internet does not find fun. For example, I really enjoy old games.
The other day, I got him playing a game from the 80s.
King's Quest is amazing, and I'll die on that hill. I have no room to judge if you like Rings of Power. But let us see if we can improve it. First and foremost, we start by scrapping the whole history crammed into just 7 years. Instead, we cram the history into 7 periods of action. These periods can range in years, but they are separated by decades or even centuries. The elves, they remain consistent actors. You'd see Elrond and Galadriel season after season, but the actors that play men or dwarves change in the early seasons, allowing those characters to age out, with the last few seasons having some carryovers.
Well, what about hobbits? My precious.
There's no such things as Harfoots. And the hobbits are not doing much in history at this point in time. So, they're out. Why fight something that doesn't belong?
Oh, I suppose that makes sense. I was really looking forward to a heartwarming story of wanderers who all care for each other. Unless you stub your toe, then you're left to die to the wolves. Reminds me of home.
Let's begin with Season 1 in the year 32 to 442.
Wait, 400 years?
It'll make sense soon. This is just the most fractured point of the timeline. Here, Numenor is gifted to the noble men of the First Age who fought against Melkor. These men, known as the Edain, were honored by the Valar for their service in the War of Wrath. This season focuses on the optimism of Numenor. The early part of the season would have to focus on the elves, as the pure humans would just come and go too quickly. But this would stabilize to introduce humans and Dwarven characters in the second half of the first season. We move the date of Numenor and Gil-galad being allies earlier on. I feel this is important to maintain those elven characters as a central focus plot. While in actual lore, they had contact, but it took some time to become friends. A secondary plot of a young poor human, maybe a fisherman with big dreams, could establish a family line of secondary characters throughout the seasons. Anatar, who's Sauron in disguise, is first heard of, setting his plots in motion. The first episodes establish the arrival of the men of Numenor. Then many years go by before jumping towards the end of Elros's rule. Key characters include Elros, Elrond, Galadriel, Gil-galad, Anatar, and the new human fisherman. Elrond, Galadriel, and Gil-galad are in the show, though Galadriel would be more of a wise and noble leader instead of Lara Croft. Elrond would be a close ally to Gil-galad and less connected to Galadriel. The timeline is 4 centuries, with the bulk of that time being in the first 2 episodes. The rest of the season taking place over the last 2 or 3 years.
That's still a lot of history crammed into a small section.
Yes, but there simply is no way around that. The alternative would be to have human actors come and go every few episodes, which is an approach. But if you do this, you may not allow for the audience to form attachments to your characters, which is really important. I think it's alright to use, for an episode or 2, acting like an extended prequel at the start of Lord of the Rings. But the Elven cast keeps it grounded. Season 2 is set centuries later, around 822 of the Silver Age. The hope and the optimism of the founding of Numenor has been transformed. Numenor, now a prideful and proud race, they start establishing some colonies on the mainland. The Guild of Ventures is established by Prince Arnadil to take advantage of those early Numenor influences. In Eregion, Celebrimbor works with Anatar to forge the Rings of Power.
And Anatar shows off his great wisdom in suggesting alloys to a master of metalworking, an idea he never would have thought of himself.
High King Gil-galad warns of a new rising shadow in the east, a true deceptive plot by professional writers where the key isn't as simple as an alloy would make those scenes hit stronger. Instead of pretending that the audience has no idea what the Rings of Power are, embrace the fact that they do. Have the audience yelling at their screen that Celebrimbor is being tricked.
We don't have screens in our medieval library, so instead the scenes play out in the sky. That's how people yell at the sky.
Political tensions between the Elves of Lindon, Eregion, and Lorien create a secondary plot. Sauron's manipulations become clearer to Galadriel and Gil-galad. The family of that human from the first season? Well, that's changed. Instead of a poor fisherman, now that family is a rich craftsman. They may sell a tool or an ingredient that Celebrimbor needs. Maybe they uncover Anatar's true intentions and need to be silenced, leaving an heir, of course. The Dwarven side story is set in Khazad-dûm and is about the alliance with the elves and the heated debate over Anatar's gifts. Even Entwives can make an appearance either in this or the previous season, helping early men learn how to farm and harvest the soil. Key characters include Celebrimbor, Anatar, who is also Sauron, Galadriel, Elrond, Prince Anardil, that human merchant, possibly a Dwarven plot with characters around the Alliance or Mithril. Next up, we have Season 3. Here is when Anatar reveals himself to be Sauron. Many centuries have gone by, taking place between 1695 and 1701 of the Silver Age. Sauron attacks Eregion, using better tactics than in the show. The Numenors, led by Tar Minastir, come to the elves' aid. Our once merchant family has changed to that of a young soldier witnessing the battle firsthand. Eregion falls, Celebrimbor dies, and the rings are scattered. Sauron is driven back, but he's not defeated. Sauron's manipulations are deeper than mere deception. He fuels resentment between Numenor and the elves, planting the seeds of envy. Why should the elves live forever when men wither and die? This resentment will later bloom into full-blown imperialism. The survivors retreat and found Rivendell. The central theme has moved from pride and deception to that of arrogance and sacrifice. The dwarves play a smaller role here. They close their gates, and this begins to lead to tensions with the elves. Key characters are King Tar Minastir, Galadriel, Elrond, who leads to the founding of Rivendell. Season 4 now opens, many thousands of years later. The year is 3255. The name of the place is Numenor.
I got that reference.
In the 1500 years since the last season, Numenor has become a proud and imperialistic state. Tolkien described his world as a mythologized England, but England, spoiler alert, has a negative imperial past, as does Numenor. This is the cultural change in action. In the seasons leading up to this, Amazon would have established that unique human groups are a thing. My philosophy is unless magic states or denies something, then we should assume natural processes are at work. Unless there's a giant titan making the tides, then we should assume that's done by the moon.
Tides go in, tides go out. You can't explain it.
When groups of people settle in one place for generations, they develop distinct cultural identities, language, dress, customs, even appearance. We see this in Game of Thrones, where the Northmen, Dornish, and Sri all have visual distinct cultures. Middle-earth should also reflect that. Changes happen over the course of many generations. This isn't a biology channel, so I'll leave that for you to figure out how people change appearances.
Ask your mother.
Over dozens of generations, people tend to share many of the same traits. Instead of pulling the viewers out of a scene by having randomized actors with different traits, we show it by place. Game of Thrones did this exceptionally well. Dorne itself had an early Spanish or Mid-Eastern look, with actors often being Hispanic or Middle Eastern. Essos had a distinct look for a variety of cultures, and people from the north looked like a cohesive group. It wasn't just the ethnicity, but how they dressed, even accents. I'm a big fan of Howard's work in Conan, and it is done there as well, celebrating differences. By acknowledging that these differences exist, we can do some interesting things in the show. You show these differences in Season 4. Here you see Numenor recognizable immediately by their ethnicity and culture. You see how far they've fallen. We see perhaps Latin or Middle Eastern actors on the mainland being subjugated.
Wouldn't that anger, like, everyone?
If we acknowledge that imperialism and racism can happen, even in a fantasy setting, it makes the universe much more alive. It worked in Game of Thrones. Ignoring it did not work in Wheels of Time or Rings of Power.
I suppose so. Hiding evil history does not make it go away, does it?
No, it sure doesn't. Instead, we should learn from that evil history. And those lessons should be in our literature, in our media. Because we as an audience that exists in the real world can connect to that. We can identify with a realistic world because we live in a realistic world.
Yeah, talking to an imp in the nexus of the multiverse is very realistic.
You don't like gnomes.
Hey, my father didn't like gnomes.
Anyway, some may call this woke. And some would say it's the opposite of woke. But grounding your story makes the whole world feel alive. What the people of Numenor did to the mainland was cruel, and there should be no reason not to show that. On to the rest of Season 4. We have an imperialistic Numenor. It fights against Sauron. Sauron is defeated in Middle-earth, but he continues to manipulate events from afar. Pharazôn the Golden, the last king of Numenor, he's the guy from the show, he seizes power. He is the descendant of the Season 3 soldier, the Season 2 merchant, and the Season 1 fisherman. He arranges a forceful marriage to his cousin, and prepares for a war against Sauron. The elves grow distant, sensing Numenor's growing darkness. Key characters would be R. Pharazôn, Tar Mirel, Sauron as Anatar, and Elendil. Major events would be R. Pharazôn sailing to Middle-earth and capturing Sauron. Season 5, The Corruption of Numenor. This season is 3262 to 3310. Some years after Pharazôn the Golden becomes king, Sauron has used his position to poison the mind of R. Pharazôn. The master of deceit that Sauron is convinces them to build a temple of Morgoth. Numenor becomes a ruthless empire under R. Pharazôn. There's resistance from the faithful, led by Elendil. This season focuses more on the humans, but the elven characters can still be observers to the fall. The human sacrifices to Morgoth lead to Elendil's secret preparations to flee. The theme is seduction of power. Key characters include Sauron, Pharazôn, Elendil, and Morel. Season 6 continues with many of the same characters. Pharazôn sails with his fleet to challenge the Valar. This angers the Valar and splits the world, creating it into a sphere. Sauron watches this from his temple. Numenor is swallowed by the sea for their hubris. Elendil and his followers escape to the mainland. The themes are hubris and divine wrath. A side plot of the dwarves could be that they learned of the human sacrifices and they closed their doors to the humans just like they did to the elves. The Entwives can make another appearance, warning of the hubris and potentially helping Elendil escape. Key characters would be Pharazôn, Elendil, Isildur, Inarion, Sauron. Season 7 takes place some years later. With the emotional stakes higher than ever, the final battle looms. It takes place between 3429 and 3441. During this time, Sauron rises in Mordor and attacks Gondor, capturing Minas Ithil. Elendil and Gil-galad form the last alliance. Sauron punishes the Entwives, destroying their sanctuary, but some of them are seen escaping, leaving that a mystery for the fans. The war culminates with Sauron's defeat and Isildur's fatal decision to keep the One Ring. The battle is over, but at a great cost. The themes could be the cost of victory, bitter and sweet. Key characters would be Elendil, Isildur, Gil-galad, and Sauron, with the majority of the events being the siege of Barad-dûr and Sauron's first defeat. And that is the basic structure. It is about real people facing real problems, just set in the fantasy world. It is about imperfect nations, like Numenor, and their hubris and imperialism. It is about survivors, led by Elendil, working with his former enemies, the people his kind dominated, to overthrow Sauron. It is about people losing their faith in worshipping Morgoth, challenging the very gods of Middle-earth. Galadriel is not an impulsive warrior. She's a wise elf with powerful magic, tempted but not swayed by the allure of power. Elrond is still a dreamer. He still has powerful friendships with the dwarves, but he loses himself over time. He becomes bitter with men's weakness, first at the corruption of Numenor, and then by the ultimate betrayal at the end by Isildur. Celebrimbor knows what alloys are.
It feels a lot more bittersweet than rushing to the creation of Mordor with a complicated sword MacGuffin thingy.
Indeed. Books, shows, even video games should show build-up. It is rewarding to follow characters grow, care for them, and then witness them fall, as many heroes in the last episode did. The story of the Second Age is not an epic battle from beginning to end. It is not a sprint, it is a marathon. The story is about humanity's hubris. It's a deep subject, and not well for cheeky snips every few lines either.
The humor comes in seeing humanity's destruction!
No, Imp. This is a sad story. One of optimism turning into betrayal. The antagonists also need rethinking. Sauron isn't just an evil warlord. He's a master manipulator. The show should portray his gradual corruption of Numenor from within, echoing countless historical figures who've exploited fear and pride to seize power.
Kinda like the guy who thought it was a good idea to put wallpaper on instead of better tasting paint chips.
Exactly. We need to see Pharazôn's rise to power, not through mustache-twirling villainy, but by exploiting real concerns. Fear of elven immortality, anxiety about Numenor's stagnation, and ambition disguised as patriotism, and lies from Sauron. Finally, magic. In Tolkien's world, magic is subtle and mysterious. The show treats it like a video game spell list.
I want my lore master to have a +3 Eldritch Blast by season 2.
No. Magic should feel ancient and awe-inspiring, with its workings hinted at rather than explained. The rings themselves should be mysterious artifacts with ambiguous powers, not flashy trinkets. Middle-earth has what's called a soft magic system, magic without a set of strict rules. The benefit of the system is it has an air of mystery about it. Let's look at some examples of magic a little too flashy. with Galadriel. Galadriel swimming across an entire ocean and can take enemies with superhuman speed, rivaling that of all other elves. And whatever that mind battle was between Galadriel and Sauron, Tolkien rarely showed magic as direct combat. His most famous mind battle was between Gandalf and the Witch King, which was unseen and conveyed through the atmosphere and tension. And let us not forget about the teleporting and fireball shooting mystics. Those are problematic.
What about the dwarves? Everyone loves dwarves.
You know, I like them too. Maybe one day I'll even play Dwarf Fortress. But in the Second Age, if we're honest, the dwarves are not a center point of view. They're very important to trade, and they do help Eregion, but become isolated later on. They should be background characters and support characters to Elrond.
I noticed you didn't include Gandalf or even Balrog or even Tom Bombadil.
Bombadil can stay, but he really doesn't do much. It would just be fan service. But Gandalf and the Balrog aren't here. Balrogs are thought to be extinct except for the one in the Third Age. Do Balrogs exist? Perhaps. But I think that would detach from the experience of Lord of the Rings. In short, our Rings of Power fix boils down to just 4 changes. Number 1, structure the seasons around a singular historical set of years. Number 2, emphasize regional and cultural distinctions. Number 3, portray Sauron as a manipulator, deceiver, not as a discount Morgoth. Number 4, reintroduce magic as an ancient, subtle force.
So, what's next for the lore bound?
Oh, just a little story. It's about reincarnation, ascension, and giant robots the size of galaxies.
I have, so many questions.
And I have so many answers. Join us next time. I've also added a second paperclip to my medieval computer. It's looking much better now. Next time, I'll be gluing the Thunder Fury, Blessed Blade of the Windseeker to help.
Did someone say...
Not too loudly. You'll bring the trade chat trolls. Thanks for joining me on this adventure through Middle-earth. If you enjoyed the adventure, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more tales to come. Until next time, fellow lore masters.